Hey guys, I'm Crystal and welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk about things like choosing your college major, your career choice, identity, and basically all things to help your life. In this video, I will be sharing 3 proven ways that you can get a job with no experience. So I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have had so many different jobs in so many different sectors, like
construction to banking to advertising to nightlife to education to retail.
I feel like I've had almost everything, and I won't give the exact number just because I think I'm still too afraid to say how many jobs I've had. But if there's one thing that I know for sure, it's how to get a job with no experience, because every time I transitioned into a new field, I didn't have the experience. As you already know, they say that actions speak louder than words, which is why I'm giving you practical tips that you can start implementing today. The tips that I'm sharing with you is like killing 2 birds with 1 stone, or maybe even a few birds with 1 stone. At least by starting with tip number 1, you will be doing just that. So tip number 1 is to create the interview yourself. What you want to do is approach a company that you are interested in, whether they are advertising for a vacancy or not. First, let me just start with giving you a personal example. And one is a few years ago, I think it was back in 2016, I really wanted to start my own online business. But at that same time, I also had a full-time job. So what I did was I ended up quitting my job prematurely, which was a big no-no. It was a huge mistake that I had made early on in my entrepreneurship endeavors. Although I was making income, I wasn't making consistent income, and I wasn't making enough to keep me afloat just for basic security purposes. So once I came to a place where I was like really struggling and I really needed to get a job, of course, began to job search. What I did was I Googled every advertising agency that came up on the first 2 pages of Google that were near where I lived, and I emailed every single one of those businesses. Out of the 2 pages, however many listings are on a page, 2 people got back to me. There was only 1 employer that actually had me come in for the interview the very next week. Now, I ended up getting that job. He told me basically he was giving me that job because he had never had anyone reach out to him like that for work, and that showed him that I was very self-motivated and eager to learn. And of course, what employer doesn't want that on their team? So by you taking initiative, that is showing an employer that you are confident, that you are valuable, and that you are unique. You will definitely stand out against everybody else if you go and take initiative in getting the job that you want first. Number 2 is network and always ask. And I have to throw in always ask. Let me just throw in a story for why I am tagging always ask onto tip number 2 when it comes to networking. I was looking for a job and I was browsing Craigslist, and I found something that came across as was a little vague, but it seemed like your typical admin stuff. What the heck, I'll try it because it definitely enticed me because it was pretty good pay, at least for me, especially with not having a college degree at that time. So I went to Hollywood for the interview, asked your typical interview questions, tell me about yourself, why are you unique, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, after the interview, I was offered the position. However, because at this time I had already knew what kind of industry it was in, I ended up telling the guy who was interviewing me that I appreciated his time and, thank you for having me come in. Felt like he was a great person to work for because he really did seem like an amazing person to work for, but that position, that job, it really just didn't feel like a good fit for me. And because the interview had went so well and he seemed like an easygoing person, just ended up asking him, do you know anyone who is hiring for a bartender or a cocktail waitress? And I know it's like, the only reason why I wanted that back then is because I knew I could work like 2 nights a week and basically get a full week's pay. Luckily, he had a friend who worked at Crest back in Hollywood. I probably completely dated myself with telling you about Crest. But anyways, he had a buddy who worked at a club, so he gave me his contact information. I reached out to his friend later that day, actually when I got home, and long story short, 3 interviews later, I ended up getting the job at a new club somewhere based in Studio City. And when we had our first employer meeting, the owners were telling us, like, you guys should feel really proud because there was over 300 people who interviewed to work here, and you guys were the chosen ones. The reason why I'm telling you this story is not to be like, to like brag, because it's not nothing to brag about. It's just to show you that you just have to ask. Like, I didn't even really know that guy, and I was actually there for an interview, but I only got that job because I asked somebody, and luckily he knew someone. So when I say network, it's like, yes, you have to get out there and speak to people, but you also don't need to know people for months upon months and then finally ask them. I mean, depending on the conversation, depending on the person, depending on all things considered, you can always ask, hey, by chance, do you know anyone who's looking for XYZ? Okay, so now maybe a challenge can be, what if you don't have that right now, right? Maybe you're thinking like, I haven't met someone, or I don't necessarily want to go on Craigslist and meet someone through an interview and ask them like that. Well, you don't have to. Nowadays, you can just Google the business that you want to, right? Maybe you already do this, but you can Google the business you want to, go to their website, find their social media icons, their Facebook, their LinkedIn, their Twitter, their Instagram, whatever they have, and do some investigated work. Now, I'm telling you this because I believe that you're going to do this with good intention, which is to obviously express your interest in obtaining employment with them, but research them, find out what maybe groups they're in, what committees they're involved in. For example, this is what you would do. Say you find on their LinkedIn page that many of the employees, including the employer, say they are members of the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce holds a meeting once a month. But now that you've done the research, you can schedule an accidental bump in with them and show them that you're interested, or go out there and meet them, introduce yourself, so that you can potentially get the inside scoop when they're hiring, or maybe they just create a position for you. Number 3 is probably a person's least favorite to hear, but sometimes there truly is no way around it, and that is to get the experience that you need. The good news is you can do this a few ways. If you are not enrolled in a community college or a university, you can always see if there is volunteer work in a area that you want to be a part of, or a volunteer work that will give you the experience that you need. The other kind of way that you can get around that is that you can ask everybody you know. You can ask friends and family. Either way you go, you're going to have a reference point that can validate or confirm that yes, so-and-so worked with my children, she did a phenomenal job. Whatever the case is, I mean, that's the goal, that you're going to do an amazing job. Of course, helping them in an area that is relevant to the experience that you are trying to get. If you're a high school student or you go to a college, I always recommend your career center. If you don't know if you have one, ask your teacher or go into the admin office to find this information out. In high school, you can find out if there are electives where you can get work experience. For example, when I was a senior, instead of taking an elective like in art or something, I took an elective for work experience. So I was able to be placed in a retail store for like the last hour and a half. I was able to gain the experience while in school. So you can see what kind of high school, so you can see what kind of electives or programs they have at your high school. And in regards to community college, you can always approach the Career Center and let them know that you're interested in internships, you want to see what kind of jobs are available. And lastly, you can go to your specific department on campus and ask if they have any internship or work experience related positions available for those who are in your degree only. So for example, if you are an English major who is specializing in creative writing, you would go to the English department, speak to somebody at the front desk. If you have any internship or job postings for this department, for students in this department only, because sometimes they do. All right, guys, so I hope this information has helped you, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any tips that I'm giving, things to improve your college and career happiness. Okay, bye guys.